Guys, I'm an idiot. Let's just get it out of the way early. Strengths I almost even forgot about. More light bulb moments and things that I don't think that we are talking enough about that are not a disadvantage, but an advantage and a strength for South Carolina going into 2025. We talk about it next. Locked on Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, and I hope everyone's having a fantastic... I'm recording this Saturday night. Hopefully that means it goes up Saturday night. I know I recorded something with Chris Doring on Thursday afternoon. It didn't go up until Friday night. Not my best work, but I hope you guys are having a fantastic start to your weekend or whenever you are listening to this. Thank you for everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcast, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Listen, football season's right around the corner, and I mean right around the corner. We are 2 weeks away. Make sure you're getting over there to FanDuel.com or downloading the app and getting your future bets in now as we speak. I'm hot. It's 1,000 degrees down here, but I got a good episode for you. Going over some stuff that I don't feel like I did a good enough job of realizing until just recently. And it was on the call with Doring that he brought up a couple of things that like I kept talking about these light bulb moments, and I had a few more of them, and I want to talk about them with you guys. And I started the show by saying I'm an idiot. I don't think that's a shock to you guys. You guys have heard me try to pronounce last names, right? You've seen that this sign is missing one of the most important letters in it. I don't think I'm the brightest bulb in the box. But here's the thing. I feel like every now and then we'll come around and we'll finally get to the end result that we were hoping for and finally having that, like I said, eureka light bulb moment. And I got a couple of them about this team. And the closer we get to it, I felt like this last year. I felt like this going into last year. I felt like there was so much more disrespect and kind of an afterthought about South Carolina and going into the year. And it wasn't even not even disrespect. It was way much just more like, the expectations aren't great. I mean, the expectations are, can Shane Beamer get to a bowl game? He really needs to get to a bowl game if he wants to keep his job. If he wants to keep his job, that was like the narrative, right? And, lo and behold, Beamer goes out there and wins 9 games. And they have one of the best seasons, really. Listen, guys, like a decade and a half ago, this would have been one of the best seasons you had in program history. So you got to love that, right? I look at this team now going into where we are this year, and I feel similarly – that's a tough word – than I did a year ago as we get closer and we're inching to like the start of the season where the confidence just, for whatever reason, just keeps going up. And I thought about this the other day. Okay. You want to talk about advantages. One of the things that everyone keeps talking about, and I also want to preface this real quick by saying, I promise you, I am not trying to be a homer or a sunshine pumper or Mr. Optimistic or anything like that. I promise you that's not where this is coming from. I could very well be wrong. And you guys let me know in the comments if you think I am. But I also think that we're not talking about the flip side of one of the negatives of this team that people are throwing out there that could be a positive. And that's this. Everyone wants to talk about the interior defensive line and what you lost in the front seven of that defense. You lost 6 of 7. You lost all 3 linebackers. Lost 212 combined tackles from just the linebackers. Bam Martin-Scott, Demetrius Knight Jr., Debo. You lost 212 combined tackles. 3 of your top 4 tacklers. You lost the SEC Defensive Player of the Year at the other edge position. You lost two interior defensive linemen. I get all that. But then I started thinking about it. And I don't think teams are going to line up and run the ball at will against South Carolina. They are too talented, even with those losses, for teams to be able to just line up for 4 quarters and run the football down your throat, and that be their means and their avenue of victory. Like that's not the journey teams are going to go on against South Carolina to go get a win. Not for 4 quarters. You may have some success. You may have some success on short yardage. You may see teams like Ole Miss even. It's like, well, we got some really good 7-8 yard gains early in our drives or on first down early in what do you call it? Early down situations. And then it's 2nd and 2. And now we can open up our playbook where we can either run for 2 yards or we can do play action pass or whatever. Kind of the same thing South Carolina wants to do. A lot of teams want to do. But I tell you what, I think the idea that this massive, massive disadvantage and massive, massive question mark about the interior defensive line and right up the middle especially, I look at the biggest games that South Carolina is going to play, and then I look at this and I say, I don't know if that's the bread and butter for some of those teams. I'll give you the perfect example. Hold on. Look, you think about LSU. I think about LSU, and I think about this. I'm telling you, as being somebody that's been close to that program down here, and I've talked to like directly with the OC Joe Sloan when he's met with the media, and just kind of asked. One of the main questions was, "Hey, listen, you guys were averaging 59% of your play calls last year to be passing plays, 41% run game. You could not run the ball effectively, even with the offensive line you had a year ago. That seems to be what they're trying to go to this year as well, but with a little bit more balance. But throwing the football is where they're going to thrive, right? Throwing the football is where they're going to thrive, not running the ball. Alabama is going to be the same way. And I think even more so than you saw, a season ago when you had someone that was, someone like Jalen Milroe, because even on your design run calls, you had a lot of QB stuff. You had a lot of and they might do some of that with Ty Simpson. But I look at the most difficult games on your schedule, right? I think the two that pop out the most, LSU, Alabama. LSU, Alabama, Clemson, A&M. I think those are the 4 hardest games you're going to play, right? I don't think that's any big surprise. Now, listen, I'm not writing off Clemson because I think, like I've said before, as much as I hate to say it, I think going into the year, I think they're one of the best teams on paper in the entire country. But I look at those other 2 games that everyone's already written you off as a loss. At LSU at night, most likely at night, right, in Death Valley, and then Bama at home for homecoming, right? You get a week off for that LSU game, right? That week off didn't help last year. Going into the Ole Miss game. Got it. But here's the deal. I look at that LSU team and I say, okay, well, you threw the ball 59% of your plays last year. I don't think you're going to overcorrect, especially with a guy like Garrett Nussmeier and an offensive line that has been pretty bad so far in fall camp. I don't think you're going to try and force the run game, especially with everything you have at receiver. So that's a matchup where LSU is most likely going to go in and try to throw the football all over the field like they did all last season, right? All last season. I look at Alabama and I say, listen, I think you're not going to see the same thing with Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe had around 15 carries per game last year. They're not going to do that with Ty Simpson. Jam Miller might have a little bit bigger role this year at running back. He might get, instead of, I think it was 11 carries a game last year with Justice Haynes, or 8 or 9, or whatever it was. I think he might end up getting around 14 or 15 and get the lion's share of those. Fine. But you're not going to see, I think you're going to see something more similar to the 2023 Washington offense versus last year's Bama offense. Here's another reason why. You get Ryan Grubb as your OC at Alabama. He was the OC at Washington with Kalen DeBoer. He was also there with him at Fresno State for a year, I believe, maybe in Indiana, I can't remember. But those two have been linked together. And the last time they were together was the 2023 Washington season, which I think that's a much closer offense that they're going to run at Alabama this year than what we saw at Alabama last year. 2023 Washington, that's the offensive identity and model I think they're going to go after for this year's Alabama team, much more than last year's Alabama offensive identity and model that they had under Nick Sheridan, who was the OC then. And so what I'm saying then is, when you look at the numbers there for Washington, they threw the ball in 58% of your pass plays. Pretty simple stuff here. What's the best units of all the position units on this team? What's the best one? The secondary. And so I'm not saying that, South Carolina's going to go up there and they're going to lock down every single 4 or 5-star receiver that Alabama and LSU throw at them. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is this idea that you're walking into automatic L's and automatic losses just because of, oh man, they got so much talent. And the Alabama game was close last year, but it's not going to be close this year. They're going to be so much better. They're a shoo-in for the playoff. That's what we said last year. The reason they started in the top 5. They were number 1 in the country until they lost to Vanderbilt. And then you talk about like LSU, like people feel LSU might be a shoe-in for the playoff. The amount of talent Brian Kelly brought in, especially from the portal, 11 four-star players from the portal. No one else in the SEC had more than 5. I mean, that's a ton of talent. That's a ton of talent. I'm not saying you're going to go lock down every single one of those receivers and just have an overwhelming advantage. What I am saying, this idea that this overwhelming, insurmountable, massive disadvantage that South Carolina has because of what they lost in their front 7 and on the D-line and again in the run game, all that stuff, that's not exactly the matchup that people are going to take advantage of on this schedule in your biggest games. It's not. We're going to keep talking about it. We'll keep talking about it until I convince myself I'm right. Okay? Or you guys tell me I am. Or wrong. I don't know. Anyway, before we come back, we're going to keep talking about this. And I want to look at some other things too about it from the disadvantage standpoint that I really do think you flip it on its head, you put a mirror on it. I think it's a bigger advantage than people realize for South Carolina. We will talk about more of that when we come back. Now, before we go to commercial, I do want to give you a quick shout out to another one of our sponsors from today's episode, our good friends at Wayfair. And I tell you what, I wish I would have gone to Wayfair today. The fiance made me go to Home Goods. Had a horrible time. There was no less than 87,000 people in that store. And what we should have done was gone to Wayfair. I tell you what, as summer winds down, there's something nice about getting back into a routine you love. And Wayfair makes it easy to set yourself up for the season ahead. From bedding and linens to storage solutions for every single room, Wayfair is your one-stop shop to refresh your home. I tell you what, we went out today to go look at chairs for the living room. We need a couch. We just got our new bed, which is great. No more sleeping on the couch for this guy. But there's still so many things we need, and Wayfair has us covered from top to bottom, left to right, and everything in between. It is the perfect time to get our home ready, especially going into the season, whether that's organizing, upgrading our workspaces, or even getting signs that don't have missing Ks, or making weeknight dinners easier. Get organized, refreshed, and back to the routine for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's Wayfair, Wayfair. Every style, every home. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right, we're back with more Locked On Gamecocks. I appreciate you guys joining us, and I hope you guys are having a great weekend, like I said. By the way, tomorrow we'll have some more stuff. I believe you had a second fall scrimmage this week, and most places did. We're also going to start getting into a little bit more of the big picture SEC stuff, and just talking about some of the opponents you have coming up. And here's I'll give you a quick breakdown of our overall plan. So for next week, big week. We got J.D. Pickell on Tuesday. We got Brooks Austin on Wednesday. We got Josh Pate coming on Thursday. Big week for interviews. And then once Sunday starts, it is a week-long preview of Virginia Tech and all that kind of stuff. I do want to talk briefly about Virginia Tech now, not as in-depth as we're going to that week, obviously, to build up the show because that'll be game week. But that is the plan for the next 2 weeks. I hope y'all are excited. I know you guys seem to enjoy the Chris Story episode. It was great to have CD on here. And, of course, we do want to have more people like that during the year as well. So I think next week's going to be a lot of fun. Pate is very excited. We're doing it, I think, like Thursday morning at 8 a.m. We got JD coming on Tuesday afternoon. He's very high on Lenore Sellers. And then we have Brooks Austin. You might not be as familiar with those guys. You should be. He's a great dude, and he's really good at what he does, which is breaking down film, watching film, and he is massively high on Lenore Sellers. All right, I want to get back into this, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about what you got coming up from this year, and I think the games that feel like a disadvantage. And I tell you what, the only one that I keep going to is A&M. Like I've said from the beginning of the season or the beginning of the offseason, I think there are 2 games on this schedule that I have even chalked up as a loss that I think they're most likely to lose going into the year. Okay. And that is LSU at night because it's a very tough environment, and then A&M. But the more I look at the LSU game, the more I look at this and I say, man, I don't know, that matchup is better than I think it is. We're really giving them credit for. And I think part of it too is it's not even just the offensive side of it, because LSU is going to put up points. They're going to put up points. They're going to put up a lot of yards to the air. I'm telling you right now, as somebody that's watching these practices, it feels very much like what you're hoping South Carolina will be, and that is this receiving core at LSU. You could just draw 3 names out of a hat. Any combination of 3 guys in that receiving room, I feel like they could go out and give people fits. I feel like they could go out there and give people fits for 60 minutes every single Saturday. So I think that's what you're hoping for. It's probably what you're going to get next year for South Carolina too. Maybe even you get it this year. I don't know. Like maybe those freshmen are just maybe it is some of the stuff we've seen in some of these other historic receiver rooms because of how that was the best receiver class in the country for any team last year. Okay. Now I also look at the fact that what's the one thing LSU has struggled with the most as a team, besides their own expectations and fan expectations and season openers? What's the one thing they have struggled with more than anything? Okay. And I brought up the season opener thing. I don't know how many of you guys know this, but they've lost 5 straight season openers, 5 straight. And now they're going to Clemson to start this year. Here's a thing too, that people aren't talking about. Let me give you, and I know we spent a lot of time talking about LSU even this week, but like, think about this scenario, because that's a game that everyone keeps looking at. It's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, like there's no chance that South Carolina's going to win. That's a dub. I mean, it's at home for LSU. Like nobody walks into Death Valley and beats LSU like that, especially at night. I mean, we've seen that before. We've seen that happen a bunch. Saw it last year with Bama. But like, what was the thing that Bama was so good at last year? A running quarterback. What was one of the main reasons South Carolina was up on that team at halftime last year? What was the final score of the first half? A 75-yard touchdown from a running quarterback. They could not stop a dual threat quarterback, especially when they had the RPO. And so I think, and like, you know, the mesh concepts and all those things, and like putting the ball in Rocket Sanders' belly, and them having to have their linebackers figure out, hey, did Sellers keep it? Is it like, you know, all that kind of stuff. They struggled with that all year. Maybe they get way better at it this year. But again, that matchup with LSU, there's a lot of favorable like X's and O's type things, like directly against each other. Their best strength is their receiving room. South Carolina's biggest strength is their secondary. One of their biggest weaknesses last year was Nussmeier when he's under pressure. Hello, Dylan Stewart. When he's under pressure, having turnovers, he had 3 of them against A&M. You have the number 1 ranked team in the SEC over the last 4 years combined in terms of total turnovers forced with 88. That's what Clayton White defenses do. So, and then the other part of it is you know, like I don't think they're going to struggle as bad on the road. I brought up Alabama. You were a sailed pass to the back of the end zone from the Lower Sellers last year from tying that thing up, right? And who knows what happens. The other part of that South Carolina part, or the LSU part, is I don't think they're going to beat Clemson. I hope they do for a number of reasons, not just because all my neighbors will be happy, but also because anytime Clemson loses, that's a dub for us. So I would love to see that. I will also tell you that they got to go to Ole Miss. And I've told you guys this before. I don't think that trip to Ole Miss for South Carolina is that daunting of a place. I don't think Ole Miss is that daunting of a place. I don't. It's 62,000 Vineyard Vine mannequins that have come to life. Jace, Trace, Trent, Brent, all those guys in as much Peter Millar and Patagonia vest stuff as possible. I don't think it's that difficult a place to play, especially for South Carolina. LSU's lost the last 3 games there. What if we're living in a world where LSU already has 2 losses? And the outside noise is getting so loud, and like the pressure on Brian Kelly is so much. Like, you may be looking at a much different team than what South Carolina should be, which, in my opinion, going into that game is probably at most a 1-loss team. At most a 1-loss team. That means they would have to trip up somewhere on the neutral site game against Va Tech or against Kentucky at home, Vandy at home, or Mizzou on the road. You're going to be favored in all those games. Now, there's 2 teams that I do think are going to give this South Carolina team a little bit more fits than we're ready to admit. One of the reasons I think that the A&M game is going to be tough, because they are a team that's going to line up and run the ball right at you. It wasn't tough for South Carolina last year, but going to College Station is very, very difficult to win there. I saw somebody post this today. It's so difficult to win there. Even A&M struggles to do it. But this is a place where South Carolina has struggled mightily against A&M. So I think it's fair to bring that into account. I think they're also going to be much better than they were a year ago in year 2 of Mike Elko. And it's also an offense that runs the ball 59% of the time. Now, I say all that to also say they came in with a top 10 ranking and a one-loss team last year, and you ran them out of the effing building, right? You ran them out of the building. So, crazier things have happened. The Virginia Tech game, I think, is interesting. It's interesting because that A&M team is a team from a play calling standpoint. I always say I think balance is where you want to live. Balance is where you want to live. You have to be able to run the football, but balance is where you want to live. If you can be as close to 50-50 as possible, that's where you keep defense on your toes. Or if you want to have more of an identity and you're going to run the football 52, 54, 55% of the time, that's fine. I get it. But this is anytime you're nearing the 60% mark, that is leaning into being more one-dimensional than you want to be. A&M was 59% run plays last year. Virginia Tech was 58%. I think Virginia Tech they're going to go into this game desperate and begging for a win. They have got to get a win. 6-7 a year ago with all the preseason hype they had then, that wasn't acceptable. And they are desperate to get off to a good start and get a win under the belt, especially a win over an SEC team, especially a win over a top 15 team, right? Like they're going to come out, I think, and pull out all the stops against this South Carolina team. I really do believe that. But most of their stops that they're going to be pulling out are running the football. And I think that one of the things you will see from some of these teams that are inferior to South Carolina, Vandy, Kentucky, Mizzou maybe a little bit, one of the things that they're going to try to implement, and Virginia Tech falls in that category as well, one of the things they're going to try to implement is they're going to run some clock. They're going to try to run the football, keep the clock rolling. I know the clock runs in general, but like running the football and trying to elongate drives for as long as possible and kill you with like a death by 1,000 paper cuts type situation where it's 3 yards in a cloud of dust, 4 yards here, 4 yards here, 3 yards here, first down, move the chains. The best defense that I think I'm saying this right. I always mess this up. The best game plan for a lot of these teams is going to be keeping Lenore's Sellers off the field. And if they can do that, that's probably their best defense. You know what I mean? Their best defense is probably going to be a consistent run offense that is able to move the chains, eat up clock, and keep Lenore's Sellers in this offense on the sidelines. So, Virginia Tech, a team that runs the ball 58% of the time, that is, I look at that matchup, and I know they're not as good as LSU. I know they're not as good as A&M. I know they're not as good as Clemson, and I know they're not as good as Alabama. That matchup is a little bit more, I don't want to say concerning. That matchup's a little bit more intriguing than the other ones. So that's all. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to finish up the show with one final thought as we go into the rest of this Saturday. Before we do that, do you want to give a shout out to one of my favorite friends? Not that Wayfair isn't, because they are too. One of my favorite friends, though, FanDuel. Listen, it's August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Okay, I tell you what I'm rolling with. The Saints win the Super Bowl. Nope, not at all. They are terrible to watch. I do think the Falcons are way better than people think. I also think Bryce Young's will be better with the Panthers this year as well. So I'm not expecting Michael Penix to go win the MVP, nor Bryce Young. But I do think one of those two teams, we're going to go over their win totals. And I think the Falcons could be the NFC South Division champ. So that might be a future I would be all in on. Visit the FanDuel app today, though. Start planning your future bets immediately because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Ooh. All right, let's close out today's show. It's hot back here. Final thoughts on the show today. I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning and kind of just in there. I think I think as the season gets closer, I don't feel like it's this overly optimistic thing about this team. This is a young team. There's a lot of unproven names on this team. But by God, do you have some talent here as well. I cannot wait to see guys like Fred Johnson go take the field. I cannot wait to see Sean Murphy be a leader of that defense. I can't wait to see this secondary and how good it could be, even with the loss of Eamon Worry, right? Like, I think that secondary is really good. There's going to be some new faces in the front seven there. And I think that a lot of them, like we didn't know Kyle Kennard was going to be the player he was last year. I think we're going to see some really, really special moments. And I just, as we get closer to it, man, the better do I feel. I just get, as we get closer and closer to it, it just feels like a more of a quiet confidence that keeps coming and keeps coming. And for the first time, I think what, like, one of the things I realized that scares people like Mark Stoops, and I love Mark Stoops to death. Great interview, super nice guy for the most part, but he's always had some bitter choice words to have with about Beamer, and he did so a couple years ago before media days and the TikTok stuff. And I love the fact that this coach is so comfortable in his own skin. I love that Beamer is comfortable in his own skin. I love the culture he's built, and I love that we're going into the season. It doesn't seem to have any looming gray cloud question marks over this program. There's some worry about, I don't know, they did lose a lot, and like, how are they going to win these games? They got to go on the road here, and Clemson's going to be really good. But like, it just feels like there's so much optimism going into this season, and I'm here for it. I don't know if they're going to make the playoff, but as we get closer, that first half of the season, man, I just feel like you have a really good chance to go out and be, the team that most of us think they're going to be. And I know the back half of the season is going to be tough and difficult and all that kind of stuff, but I just feel better and better about this team the closer we get to it. And there's going to be some wars this year, man. There's going to be some wars. That LSU game is going to be tough. That Clemson game is going to be insane. I've got to figure out a way to get in there for that. I have a friend that's trying to plan a wedding that weekend. I'm going to lose my mind. On rivalry weekend, the 2 days after Thanksgiving, she's from California. That kind of explains it. But man, I'm fired up. And I as I said multiple times already, the closer we get to it, the better I feel about it. And I don't know if that's how you guys feel. Let me know in the comments if I'm just riding too much of a wave of confidence right now. I don't know. But I appreciate you guys either way. We'll be back again tomorrow with another episode. We'll talk more about the latest from practice and fall camp and all that kind of stuff. Any news and notes that we've come across. There's still nothing that I've heard from the Russell Faison update from the NCAA. You're getting dangerously close to kind of having to start game planning without them. I don't know if they've already started game planning. Some teams have for their week one opener. I know Brian Kelly said that LSU started game planning for Clemson on Tuesday, so it's 18 days prior to that first game. So I don't know if South Carolina's going to do that or if that's on their radar yet. But when they do, it'll be interesting to see what the attitude is. And I'll tell you what, I also love what CD said the other day about this, and that is, that running back group is a lot better than people are ready to give it credit for. And I think part of that is based off, including myself at times, some of our own ignorance based out of the excitement we had for Faison. And you don't know what you don't know, but like everyone has been so high on Faison and how excited they are for him to be on the field and get him in the portal, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if we've done our due diligence and looked at how good the other running backs can be, but I think they're going to be more than fine. So that is all for today's episode. We'll be back tomorrow on Sunday for another episode. I appreciate all of you guys watching Locked On Gamecocks, making your first listen every day. Do it for your second listen. Go ahead and listen to our buddy Chris Gordy over there at Locked On SEC. Does a great job as well. Appreciate you all. And until next time, go Cox.